It was a sunny and lovely day, ideal for a wedding, and everyone was ready to celebrate. But when the priest saw the bride, he suddenly stopped everything. The reason why will surprise you. The groom's friends and family were arriving at the church in large numbers. Outside, there was a line of cars waiting to park, with security helping to manage them into the lot. Inside the church, Priest Stephen stood in his office preparing for the service that was about to begin. Both bride and groom, Lily and Charles, arrived within minutes of each other, just as Stephen liked it. He disliked it when the bride and groom came late to their own wedding. The wedding ceremony started, and it was time for the bride to walk down the aisle. Charles stood at the altar with a big smile, adjusting his suit nervously. At the church entrance, Lily, in her stunning wedding dress and veil, prepared to walk alone. Stephen knew she had chosen him to escort her, as her father could make it. He was fine with it, knowing it wasn't his first time. The music began, and Lily walked slowly towards Charles with her bouquet. As she approached, Charles grew more nervous. Stephen stood calmly as everyone sang along until Lily reached the altar. She gracefully climbed the stairs and stood beside Charles, who looked at her lovingly. Stephen gently encouraged Charles to unveil his bride for the vows. Charles nervously lifted the veil, revealing Lily's beautiful face to everyone. Almost immediately, Stephen let out a pained yelp as he stared at Lily. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time. He grabbed his head as it throbbed painfully and staggered backward, almost slamming into the pulpit. A hushed gasp washed through the congregation as they all wondered what was wrong with the priest. The altar assistants hurried over to Stephen's side to assist him, but he shrugged off their help, insisting he was okay. Trying to get up on his own, his legs wobbled under his weight, and he went down again. The assistants were scared he might pass out, so they called for water. Stephen finally allowed them to lead him to a chair while Charles and Lily stood at the altar, looking confused by everything. The water helped calm him down. When he regained his composure, he slowly pushed himself to his feet and approached the couple, who were still patiently waiting to get married. He stopped beside them, glaring. Everyone could see he was angry. Then he announced that the wedding must be paused at once. Another gasp of shock swept through the congregation. Charles' mouth fell open as he stared at the priest as if he had suddenly sprouted horns. He couldn't understand the reason for such an extreme decision. He asked Stephen why he was doing this and ruining their big day. The priest told him he had just had a vision and needed to investigate it at once. Everyone surged to their feet, watching the couple standing on the altar, ready for whatever was going to happen next. They all knew about Stephen and his gift for seeing things beyond the physical. Stephen was a highly acclaimed priest who traveled all over the world, battling demons and delivering souls possessed by evil spirits. Many times you could simply see them once he laid eyes on them. They all had distinct markings that made them stand out from normal humans. However, there were those who were powerful enough to mask themselves and even hide from his visions. Stephen had encountered visions of all kinds over the course of his life as a priest. He knew the world was a dangerous place and one had to be vigilant. A few years ago, he had been transferred to this church, which was in a small town. He decided to keep a low profile and stopped his frequent travels due to his age, leaving it to the younger generation. Meanwhile, he took responsibility for the spiritual welfare of his congregation and host of the community. From the moment he moved into town, he fought off all malevolent and evil spirits that held the town back and made their children sick. Thanks to everything he did, he won many souls, and everyone hung on his every word as if it were gospel truth. This was why, when he said he had a vision, everyone in the congregation searched their hearts, ready to take action. They knew that either the bride or the groom had a spiritual problem that needed addressing. Stephen grabbed the microphone and spoke into it. He said he had always been suspicious about Lily from the very first day Charles brought her around for marriage counseling. She had looked so familiar, but he couldn't place where he had known her from. He had even gone as far as digging into her background with the help of the police, but nothing had come of it. He found nothing suspicious and eventually let it go, thinking she was just someone who resembled another person. DK was having none of it. He told Stephen there was no way he could have known Lily before, and even if he didn't remember Lily, she would have remembered him. But she also had no idea who he was. DK was certain the priest was mistaken, and that this was ruining his wedding day. He begged to continue with the ceremony so they could exchange their vows. Stephen shook his head, feeling uncertain. He turned to Lily and said he needed to check something on her back before proceeding. She was fully covered in her wedding gown, making it impossible for him to see. When she tried to leave, Stephen told his congregation not to let her go. He insisted that he needed to be sure before the wedding could continue. He clarified he didn't need her to undress but wanted to check a mark behind her shoulder. Lily adamantly refused, causing a division among the congregation. Some didn't understand Stephen's concern. Charles and Lily had come to marry, but Stephen seemed to have other plans. Others supported Stephen, trusting his judgment from past experiences. They recalled his successful exorcisms and accurate predictions. Eventually, more people joined in urging Lily to comply. Stephen then called 5 trusted women from the church council to take Lily into his office and check her back. Despite her protests, they ignored her threats and escorted her inside. After a while, the office fell silent. Moments later, the women emerged, leaving Lily inside. Stephen eagerly asked if they found anything. They nodded, revealing a hook symbol burned into Lily's skin. This confirmation was enough for Stephen. He dropped his microphone at once and made his way into the office, closing the door behind them. Almost immediately, they began to hear raised voices again. Stephen was shouting at the top of his voice, praying fervently and invoking the hosts of heaven. Lily was shouting too, muttering unintelligible words that made no sense to anyone. As the congregation listened on, their hearts raced with terror. They were certain Stephen was delivering Lily from an evil spirit, and with every shout Lily made, Charles felt his heart sink further. Eventually, Lily could barely speak anymore, and the sounds she made became more animal-like. At times, she barked ferociously like a dog. Other times, she roared like a lion, rattling the church windows. Amidst this, they could also hear sounds of destruction as chairs were smashed against walls and tables overturned. It sounded as if Lily was trying to break free. Finally, they heard one last sound from Lily. She was mewing like a wounded cat. Stephen's prayers slowed down, becoming quiet mutterings, almost unintelligible. Silence filled the church once again. Everyone looked at the closed office door, unsure of what had just happened. The unsettling sounds they heard left them afraid, wondering if something had happened to their priest. It seemed he might have faced something beyond his usual battles. This spiritual conflict shook the church profoundly for the first time. As the silence stretched on and the closed door remained, people hesitated, unsure whether to check on Stephen and Lily. Charles was anxious, unable to stay still. Just as he moved towards the door, there was a click and it swung open. Stephen emerged, looking visibly aged and exhausted. He staggered to his seat and slumped into it, covered in sweat. Despite his condition, the congregation erupted into applause, relieved that he had emerged victorious on his own. After the applause quieted, Stephen took the microphone and spoke. He recounted encountering Lily 5 years earlier in another city, where she was marrying another man. Even then, he had felt uneasy about her, sensing something suspicious. Yet he could see a vision, though it didn't reveal her as evil, but showed a mark on her back resembling both a 6 and a hook. This vision troubled him, but without concrete evidence, he couldn't act on his suspicions. In the end, unable to stop her marriage based on a gut feeling alone, he officiated her wedding, only to deeply regret it. That very night, on their wedding night, Lily fatally stabbed her husband and vanished without a trace. Despite efforts to find her, she eluded capture. Stephen blamed himself for not acting sooner, which led him to request a transfer to his current church. The weight of guilt from his mistake haunted him, making it impossible for him to find peace in his former parish. He had nearly repeated his mistake when Charles brought Lily before him as his wife. Throughout their marriage counseling, he had an uneasy feeling about Lily, sensing she was hiding something. Despite her familiar appearance, he couldn't place her face or remember where he might have seen her before. This version corrects grammatical errors and clarifies the narrative flow for better readability. He could do nothing at all. Thankfully, seeing her in a wedding dress had done it for him. The moment Charles lifted her veil, it reminded him of the man who had done the exact same thing 5 years ago. Just then, it was as if his eyes opened and he saw Lily for who she truly was. He immediately had a vision where he saw her killing Charles later that night. This prompted him to halt the wedding immediately and proceed to vanquish the power of evil. As Stephen finished speaking, his words were met with silence as the congregation processed the astonishing story. They marveled at just how powerful Lily had been and how close she had come to snuffing out Charles' young and vibrant life. Just then, the door swung open and Lily stepped out. She looked weak, sweating even worse than Stephen. In the few minutes she and Stephen had battled, she appeared to have lost a significant amount of weight, and her facial features were now gaunt. She leaned against the wall as she approached Charles, who stepped away from her in shock. Then she confessed. Her real name wasn't Lily but Lilith. She revealed she belonged to a secret group aiming to gain power and wealth by seducing and marrying men, then killing them on their wedding night. This act granted immense power, especially on that night. Lilith had already killed at least 665 men and aimed for 666 to become the group's queen. Lilith used a spiritual mask to hide her true intentions from Stephen initially, but he eventually saw through it. This led to a fierce battle where Stephen stripped her of her powers. As Lilith finished speaking, she collapsed and died, shocking everyone present. Charles, devastated to learn the truth about the woman he loved, was comforted by Stephen, who urged Lilith's swift burial due to the evil around her. Despite the tragic turn of events, Stephen's intervention saved Charles' life. Grateful for Stephen, Charles vowed to become more involved in his church and fight against such evil. This experience changed Charles profoundly from that failed wedding day onward. What an amazing story. Who would have thought Stephen would save Charles' life like that? What do you think you would have done if you were in Charles' place? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.